Hello and welcome to State Scoop TV. I'm Jake Williams. We're here with Dave Weinstein. He's the Chief Technology Officer for the state of New Jersey. Dave, how you doing?
Good. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Happy to have you. So Dave, you're relatively new to your role as CTO, but the role of the CIO figure in government is constantly changing. How have you seen that in New Jersey?
Well, so the big sea change that occurred in New Jersey a little over a year ago is that we really elevated the role of the CIO to the C-suite, right? The governor came out and in very unambiguous terms and said, we're going to have strong central leadership as it relates to IT. We have to, from a governance perspective, and most importantly, in order to enforce compliance around cybersecurity. So that's been a sea change for the state of New Jersey, the executive branch as a whole. We're large government. We have upwards of 50 agencies, upwards of 50,000 state employees. So if you're truly going to have a strong governance model and one that values risk management, you really need executive leadership, and it needs to start at the top. So that's been, like I said, a really positive development in New Jersey, and one that I think the agencies appreciate as well. So oftentimes, this is portrayed as kind of a combative relationship between the central authority and the distributed agencies. But to the contrary, the agencies see this as kind of empowering their voice and their priorities with the executive. So that's been a very positive development.
It's exciting. And tell us about some of the biggest projects that you and your team have gotten done this year, and how is it really changing the way that you and your state do business?
Yeah, so for us, we've spent a lot of time the past 6 months especially realigning the critical IT functions in the state in a way that's more conducive to some of the trends that we're seeing in the technological space. To begin, we actually decentralized a lot of our application development functions. So if an agency had an application that exclusively serves their constituency, I said the central IT agency is no longer going to manage that. We're going to give that responsibility to the agency, align the developers with the business itself to accommodate more agility and make sure that we're not being unnecessarily inefficient, right? We still have a role in governing the development of those applications, but the actual day-to-day operations now reside with the agencies. On the flip side, we have a pretty large-scale IT infrastructure consolidation underway. And the goal at the end of the day is really to consolidate all the disparate data centers and server rooms that exist around the state into an enterprise shared environment, and in the process make sure that we're upgrading all of our infrastructure, and we're embedding security controls into everything we build and deploy. So we've consolidated compute storage network and data center operations within the state's Office of Information Technology that I lead, and we're standardizing everything we do as it relates to infrastructure services. This way we can pool our purchasing power as a state entity vis-a-vis the vendor community, but also ensure that that we're putting in the right security controls across the board, not just in one data center, but in all the data centers.
That's outstanding. And so you mentioned security, and you talked about how that's integrating into your entire approach. Tell me a little bit more about how you're preparing your team and your state to become more secure as this cyber threat landscape continues to grow.
Yeah, so one of the big focuses for us is, and this is really a long-term approach that we're taking to cybersecurity, because it's somewhat new to state governments at the moment, and I think the goal for a lot of folks is to kind of rush and accomplish some wins. And we want to do that, but we also want to make sure that we take a strategic, deliberate approach to this. And a big part of that has to do with staffing, right? We've got somewhat of a crisis on our hands as it relates to cybersecurity staffing, not just in New Jersey, but across all governments, from the federal level down to the local level. So we need to get a little more progressive, and we need to get a little more creative about how we staff and source for our human capital needs. So we're focused on that. But separate apart from the personnel and staffing piece, we're really focused on building out our monitoring capacity as well as our incident response capacity, right? It's hard to really move out in a deliberate, strategic fashion on cybersecurity unless you know the full scope of the risk. And for us, the vehicle for gaining better insight into what's on our network, good and bad, is the New Jersey Cybersecurity and Communications Integration Cell, our state's information sharing analysis organization, co-located at our Fusion Center. It's a multi-institutional body that has representation from my office, from law enforcement, as well as from New Jersey's Office of Homeland Security and Preparedness. So that is kind of the central hub, the nexus, if you will, between operations, analysis, and incident response. They are leading the way as it relates to gaining better insight into what's on our network. And that data, that intel is really going to inform our next steps, for 2 years down the road, 5 years down the road, and even beyond that.
That's great. And so you talked earlier a little bit about your centralization, consolidation efforts. And one of the things that we hear a lot in this space is how those efforts lay the groundwork to embrace emerging technology and some of the cooler things that we see on the horizon. How are you and your team planning for emerging technology, whether it be AI, blockchain, any of the sort, as it comes down the pike?
Yeah, so we're talking about all the above internally, right? We still have a lot of blocking and tackling to do, so we don't want to get too ahead of ourselves with the sexier, cooler tech, but at the same time we can't neglect it because otherwise we'll find ourselves too far behind. So we've got some internal planning around AI and blockchain. I've come out on the record saying we really need to build kind of a competency around AI at the strategic level for the state. And I'm hopeful that we can do that before the end of this administration, or at least get the ball rolling for the next administration. One of the things that I'm also really focused on is IoT, right? So most folks don't realize this, but governments have been in the IoT business for years. Every traffic sign you see on the highway is an IoT device. The challenge for state governments and governments in general, I think, over the next several years is kind of embracing that next generation of IoT, taking the best of what the consumer IoT world has to offer and apply those methodologies and technologies to government. And for me, that's really about moving government and how it interacts with the citizenry away from a centralized model to a more distributed model. We could actually decrease the physical footprint of government and inject our services more into the communities at the local level through a distributed virtual and physical footprint that IoT provides. So we're exploring those opportunities with transportation, everything from our roads and bridges to also the public transportation services that we offer, as well as other agencies where citizens may have to go to a central agency to receive a service versus it coming to them in some sort of distributed model that leverages IoT tech.
Well, Dave, excited to hear about how those things grow and transform in the future. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you.
For more about what Dave Weinstein and the team are working on in the state of New Jersey, check out statescoop.com. I'm Jake Williams, StateScoop's Associate Publisher and Director of Strategic Initiatives, here with Dave Weinstein, the Chief Technology Officer for the state of New Jersey. Thanks for watching.